Mike with OLO Builders here in Winter Garden, Florida. Today is our first episode of the Contractors Corner, where we bring guests in from the construction world and get their takes on the industry and how they add value to customers we work alongside every day. This episode is sponsored by Barry Neal Carpet One. Barry Neal is a full-service flooring, cabinet, and countertop retailer located in Winter Park, Florida, and services the greater Orlando area. Whether you are building a new home or doing a renovation, set up an appointment with their friendly staff or ask your builder to use Barry Neal on your project. Barry Neal has provided a little gift bag for you, Alex.
All right.
Yeah, there you go. There's some goodies in there from them, as well as a t-shirt from us. And they would like to bring you and your family to a magic game for being on the show today. And by the way, I have also invited my family and my staff to that as well.
Awesome.
So it'll be a full game for all of us.
Very cool.
So I want to thank Alex for being our first guest on the podcast today. Today our guest is Alex Stringfellow. Alex is the principal of Stringfellow Planning and Design based here in Winter Park, Maitland, Florida.
Yeah, we outgrew our Winter Park office, so we're in Maitland now.
Just down the road. Stringfellow Planning and Design is a full-service urban planning company. They help developers build dream communities for homeowners around the general Florida area, right?
Yep.
Do you go into any other states?
We have a couple projects in the southeast, like hospitality type stuff, but primarily I'd say our current workload is Central Florida, some on the West Coast.
Okay.
So we'll reach out. It just depends. I mean, we typically stay within Florida.
Yeah, and so Alex and his team pride themselves on providing unparalleled attention to detail and tailored solutions to ensure exceptional results on every project. Their passion for design and developing communities that enhance the areas they are a part of is at their core value. Alex graduated from UCF with a bachelor's in psychology, and after graduation, he went to Rollins College, where he got his master's in city/urban, community, and regional planning. After your master's, you worked for Orange County for 4 years.
That's right.
And now he has started his own firm, and you've been doing that for probably 2.5?
7 years.
7 years, oh my God.
Early 7 on July, 4th of July.
Oh, okay.
So started on 4th of July, so my Independence Day.
Yeah, you wanted to share your independence with the United States.
Of America.
Yeah,
so that was the idea. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your background and how you got to go on your own and do what you're doing now. Psychology major, what was the decision to do that?
Yeah, so I mean, it was kind of happenstance. Started studying psychology and biology, going for a double major.
Okay.
And it was a financial choice. I had a full ride, Bright Futures. Got to the end to get my double major. The idea was going to neuroscience, and I was interested in that, and something called human factors, where you design based on how humans interact with machines. So I thought I had it all figured out. Then I talked to my advisor, and I was like, oh yeah, I need to go one more semester to finish my major in biology. And they're like, yeah, of course. But you are out of Bright Futures credits. And I was like, okay, so I'd have to come out of pocket. And they were like, yeah. And I was like, all right, I'm good. I don't want it.
Just graduate with psychology.
I'll take the psych degree. And at the time, I was working full time as well while I was in school at the Arboretum, which is kind of the landscape and natural resources department that does plantings. And somebody mentioned the Rollins program that was planning. And they're like, well, you like psychology and how people interact with spaces. Check it out. And I checked it out with one of the teachers, the adjunct professors for the program, and seemed interesting and kind of totally derailed my idea to go into neuroscience. But it was an evening program. I was able to work full time. The name of the program was kind of a mouthful, though.
It is.
Pretentious sound. It was a Master's of Planning in Civic Urbanism, headed up by Bruce Stevenson, who's a PhD over there. And then there was a couple others that were instrumental. That Fogelsong.
Yeah, I know Fogelsong.
Yeah, he's a commentator. I think he still does news casting. But yeah, that worked for Orange County for a good amount of time. Worked on their sustainability plan first, which is very interdepartmental. So a lot of coordination between everybody, from waste to energy and that kind of thing. And fell in love with the planning side at Orange County. And in Orange County, you get to work at everything from, you have projects over in Wedgefield, which is Orange County, and then you have iDrive. So I got a lot of experience from every type of density and intensity of development, and then was basically thought that I could make a living doing it myself. So rolled out about 6 or 7 years ago, and kind of haven't looked back.
And so when you were working at Orange County, were you getting your master's at that time?
I think there was a little bit of overlap on getting the master's. Maybe I was in my last semester, but I think I got my master's, and most of my tenure in the planning world, professional tenure, was after receiving the master's. So it kind of lined up pretty closely. And
the Arboretum at UCF, does that include, this is way off topic of what I wanted to cover.
That's okay.
But that includes, like, on the backside past the stadium, there's that big preserve?
Yes.
That includes the kind of nature hiking, nature trails?
Yeah, I think that this is like almost thinking of the job description, but they have the natural areas that do like prescribed burns, so I was able to become like a wildland firefighter or whatever.
Wow.
So we're cutting lines and burning the pine wood, flatwoods. They also had an 1.5 acre edible like farm orchard kind of setup. But that was my focus.
Okay.
Plants, sustainability, that kind of thing. And then they do thematic ornamental stuff. So if you go around, I think there's like a cactus garden and a couple other, regionally designed gardens. And that was done by a guy who helped actually design Lou Gardens. He ended up working for UCF. So I got to touch a little bit of everything in there, landscape and natural resources management.
And did that kind of plant design, location of where the plants go, is that something that obviously then sparked you to think about how these small kind of ecosystems can grow into a larger ecosystem?
Yeah, I think that kind of led into the interest. Obviously, my dad was a home builder, decades ago, so had some experience with that. Loved the natural design, ecosystems. Seemed like a natural way to marry those, my personal history and then professional and education kind of together.
I don't want to get ahead of myself because I got some questions on the major, because I also took a class with Bruce at Rollins.
Okay.
And I didn't realize that you knew him until we went to Jenna's party.
Yeah.
At the museum.
Yes.
And came.
Bruce came, yes.
So I took a class on celebration. Okay. And the design of celebration and the thought process of celebration and how it stemmed basically this whole new urban design movement. And it was one of the most interesting classes that I've thought of.
Awesome.
and took. And then, so what kind of classes did you focus on in your major?
The interesting thing about the program at Rollins was it was almost exclusively adjunct professors besides Bruce Stevenson, Richard Fogelsong, and maybe one or two other teachers. Like there was an art teacher, I forget her name, that was a more tenured type professor, but it was people in the industry. So the types of classes is we would have attorneys, like land use attorneys, come in and teach one semester. So we'd take land use law. We did like a design class with one of the, at the time he was the lead architect in Winter Park, kind of working for the government, Alberto Vargas. And then we had John Cunningham, another architect, taught a design studio there. So it was all industry professionals. That was the kind of stuff that we took. So you, at the end of each semester, you would present to a city your ideas as a student. So it was very hands-on, very practical. So we were doing designs, 3D models, master plans, and presenting to, on occasion, it'd be like to commission at City of Orlando or City of Winter Park. So we got a lot of public interaction. So that was the kind of stuff that we did, and it was very hands-on. They don't have the program anymore, which is sad, but maybe they'll bring it back. Launch it again.
Rollins.
Shout out. So yeah, that's what we did, and it basically gave us the expertise and a portfolio to get a job pretty quickly thereafter. Yeah,
so you, going to Orange County, you had probably experience and knowledge of who's who in the zoo there. And they already knew who you were, that you understood what they were looking for and how you could bring value because you showed that through the masters. That probably made it pretty easy to get into the. Yeah,
you're digging up memories. I kind of forgot all this. We were, as a part of the masters, part of why I got the job at Orange County is we were working on a grant program in the city of Eatonville with Orange County to do like an aquaculture or like a hydroponic farm in an old greenhouse and refurbish it. Ultimately, I don't think we ended up getting the grant, but I met David Jones there, who worked for Environmental Protection, and kind of made that connection and ended up getting a job there first.
Wow.
Yeah, so they just put you in contact, so you had relationships, and my business, like yours, is all relationship based.
Absolutely.
So who you know, and then who trusts you to do, good work.
And so let's talk about the day-to-day for you. Obviously, working with large development groups, but also, what do you provide as a service? What do you look for when, a project comes across your desk to determine if this is something that Stringfellow, planning and design wants to do?
Yeah, that's still refining what we want to do. We're led a little bit by relationships, so there are certain clients that I think we communicate well with because there's a lot of moving pieces in entitlement. But our day-to-day is someone may send us a site that has the potential to redevelop or brand new development from what I call greenfield, so it might be ag land or there's a farm on it or whatever, and they ask us the question of what can I do? So our job is to not only design something conceptually that we think is reasonable, but from that point on, if the client does engage us, we talk to the, authorities in power, the governments, the committees, occasionally HOAs or surrounding communities, and try and negotiate a reasonable development that works for everybody. So we're kind of like a negotiator. Obviously in the financial market right now, you can almost put a house anywhere.
Yeah.
And people will live there. So I think finding how you can fit some of these residential neighborhoods into areas that haven't seen growth historically is a lot of what we deal with. But we get infill projects too, more exciting projects. We do government work. We consult City of Apopka, City of Winter Park, and City of Groveland. So I will say we'll take a look at almost anything that we can improve the quality of design.
So I want to pull the thread there, but when you say improve the city design or the design of that area, are you, when you're doing research into it, are you looking at, the natural landscape of that city, trying to enhance and bring in the same style and culture, right? Like if you were to somehow find 10 acres off of downtown Park Ave, right, are you saying like, hey, we're going to bring in brick roads to this community because that's what Winter Park has, or maybe out in Howie in the Hills, bringing in that kind of more farm style fencing on the front? Is that stuff that you look at? Yeah,
so it's I think the legal term is compatibility, or at least so we look to bring a compatible development, and that the straight face test is you look around you. Winter Park is very iconic. Yeah. You can, if you understand what you're doing, you look around, take a couple photos, and what's the safe thing to do? Brick streets, Mediterranean revival architecture. Now you may lean into other, there's some Art Deco and stuff like that around there, but you can take that pattern and build it into there. Now there are places that are growing that do not have a set culture necessarily besides the agricultural, so that's where I think it gets a little more difficult. But you can look at materials, you can look at, like Howie in the Hills, its native landscape palette, so it's farm, either split rail or picket fence, and those elements, and then trying to match lot sizes up to what's adjacent. But right now the market, it's very expensive, and land is one thing that if you put more houses on less land, you can attack that affordability. So that's probably our biggest challenge, is coming up with a design of single family homes or just residential that's acceptable to the community and the elected officials.
And so obviously that's probably the hardest part of everything, right? Like,
yes,
every developer is going to want to do as many homes as possible, but the community that is pushing back is always going to want the least amount. So how do you end up finding that middle ground that the developer can see the value and the return on it, but the city is not going to push back?
Yeah, it's. I wish I had a cheat sheet, an easy button for that. It depends, but there are certain ways that we address it. The big thing that we like to bring is a kind of complete community that's reasonable. Now, there's not every site, every 50 acres should have a commercial use, but if it's somewhere where we see growth and there's a lack of services, we try and address that, even if it's convenience or grocer or something. So we try and say, hey, we're not just putting only residential here, we'll do a diversity of uses. Then we look at open spaces, and open spaces that are community building, gathering spaces. So instead of open spaces that are behind someone's house, that are privatized, we look for public open spaces that may be maintained by the HOA. I mean, you live in Baldwin, so you know all about those publicly maintained open spaces. They're in front of the houses. There's a public road around them. You can park right there and utilize it. And it has like benefits outside of, increasing the property value of the houses to be sold. And then, we look at a mix of products. So we try and look for multi-generational housing in our projects. So you have a townhome, that could be your starter home. Then you have maybe a narrow lot option, that's your move up home. Mm-hmm. And then you have an array of maybe larger lots, that's your retirement home. So you could have a family stay in the same neighborhood and love it, which you can do in Baldwin Park. Say, well, I'm starting in a condo, I'm moving to a townhome, now we're ready to upgrade to the big premium lots. So that's some of the approaches that we take. There's no easy way to answer a client call that they're like, we want all front-loaded 50 lots. We want the least amount of open space. We start there and we start that negotiation. Sometimes we have to stand in front of a community and show a plan that we personally don't think is great, but that is the public input gives us ammunition to go back to the developer and say, look, this is what you're up against. These solutions can help get there, and it's a reasonable, compromise.
Yeah, I mean, that's always going to be the hardest part, is determining what it is, because so many developments and design firms will do exactly that, and the only open space that they're selling and the views that they're selling are of the stormwater retention pond. And I mean, people pay a premium to look at water, but it's really just stormwater.
We're on the lake.
Yeah,
but they're not from Florida, and to them it's a lake.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's nice to see that you're designing with that in mind. I mean, I've seen a lot of your designs, especially on the website. You have a lot of that character that comes into it. So it kind of pulls back to where you started, right? Like looking at how different, even just like the plants can go into different areas and be symbiotic, but starting in the Arboretum, having a love of the landscape and bringing that into your design, it comes full circle on that.
Yeah, 100%. It's the ecosystem of a community. Like, how can you make it enclosed and serve as many needs as possible? Like you took the course on Celebration. That's a traditional neighborhood design, or a new urbanist design, they sometimes call it. Baldwin Park's one, Alice Beach and Rosemary Beach and Seaside up in the Panhandle. Now those are extremely exclusive communities. So how do we take it so it's a little bit more attainable to the average person? So there are sacrifices to make it, more market rate, I guess you could say. But taking those lessons, those ecosystems, and trying to find out how to make new ones that are, don't price themselves out. I mean, those communities almost become resort communities because they are or global communities because they're so desirable. Yeah. There's a huge demand.
And there's got to be a middle ground between them, because the prices in those desirable neighborhoods skyrocket. But, how do you assist a city like Groveland, Florida, which an amenity basis, not high.
Right.
How do you bring in a value of adding more homes, but not putting such a strain on the single grocery store there that's in it, but also maximizing the development opportunity?
Yeah, and there's so many different tools, and every site's a little different. I mean, deploying things like because public facilities is another big challenge, but deploying things like charter schools, where school growth is not keeping up with population growth. So there's one way to deal with school seats, and it's, there's success in that, and there's challenges too. But you can start to address those with the capital that's going to be part of the money that the developer makes. So by increasing that density, there are ways you can start to address those amenity or public service needs. Traffic is a huge one. So that's probably the other big challenge, that obviously nobody wants any more cars on the road.
No.
And that, we have some consultants that live in like Brunswick, Georgia, and they go to community meetings and they're like, oh, the traffic's terrible, and it's 3 people back to back at a light. Whereas here, the traffic's terrible, and it's a hour and a half commute, so it's a relative experience. Nobody wants more traffic, so that's probably the other biggest, comment or complaint or challenge with new growth.
And so on a day-to-day, you're just kind of looking at these sites, consulting whether you guys will be able to take on this project or if you fit with that development group. Do you have a pretty good staple of developers that you work with on a day-to-day?
Yeah, we do. We have a Rolodex of developers, and I think our bread and butter is a client that is not necessarily the end using builder. Although we work with a lot of builders, we're approved vendors for a lot of the product builders and production builders, and we work well with them and have immense respect. But if you have someone that can take the site and deploy multiple builders with multiple products, it makes our job easier. That's probably our sweet spot.
Which 10 years ago, when I first started down here, maybe even longer, there was a couple over on Hancock. There was a developer who did a large community here, and he deployed a Lennar, a Meritage, a Madame, and it was like 30 lots here, 40 lots there. Where I found now in Florida, it's become the opposite, where it's one brand developing 500 lots, and it's the same everywhere. Where I feel like that design that you're focusing on should come back. It opens it up to smaller builders like us to get involved. It opens up to more localized builders, but also bringing a product at the national level that anyone can attain.
Yeah, and that's, I think, part of the challenge is finding those teams and putting that together. They have to be well capitalized, really. I mean, or they can be kind of a broker of the deal, of the development. But that's, that limits our pool of our preferred, I won't say preferred, but ideal clients. And then I think you really need 50 acres minimum, which is actually probably on the smallest scale. Our sweet spot's in the 100 or more. I mean, we're looking at some stuff that's 1,000 acres right now. They're in the preliminary planning stages where we're looking at turnpike interchanges. We're looking at full-blown communities addressing all the issues with traffic, all the issues with schools, parks. And so those projects give us a lot of time and a lot of leverage to deploy strategies that make a good community. So the more acreage we have to work with, the better we can address all the concerns and missed opportunities that happen when you just kind of develop suburban, handshake deals, which is how a lot of Florida was developed in the 80s and 90s. But yeah, I mean, the bigger, kind of the better, provided it's well located and not in some sort of environmentally sensitive area.
So obviously 1,000 acres, big heavy lift because it expands what you're going to do. But is there really a major time investment from your perspective if someone comes to you with 50 acres or 12 acres?
Underneath 50, there have to be so few mouths to feed, fee-wise and profit-wise. Not that it's all profit-driven business, but it gets difficult to deploy our services and justify our cost to a developer. Now, if we're doing it direct and doing a small-scale development, I think it works, but because we're such a kind of higher end service, mid-high end service, depending on what we're doing, I think we just kind of price out our clients underneath that 50 range for the most part. Now we have a few boutique clients that they've done, for example, large lot subdivisions that are gated and they'll take 10 years to sell or they don't care, they're not in a rush. Those are easy, but when someone's trying to deploy 20 lots or 30 lots, it still takes, from a government perspective and like approvals, it still takes the same amount of time as 100 and 300 acres with a lot less negotiating power because there's only so many answers to a
with 12 acres. Like what can you do? You
can't. I can change the lot size. I can tweak this, but we can do what we can do, and that doesn't usually get you a lot of traction with the public. Like, I'm sorry, this is all you get, and that's kind of a non-starter sometimes.
Yeah, and so you've moved into the consulting world, right? You're adding that to your repertoire. You've got a big project with Winter Park on not only just refreshing the code standards for the thorough way of Park Ave and the main corridor, but also helping with their standards of how they want to keep building correct. Like, how are you adding that service? What are the benefits of that for you versus the communities that you serve?
Yeah, so we're taking the design guidelines, which, similar to the actual avenue itself, haven't been redone in like 30 years. So they had these kind of facade guidelines, which really lean into the idea that Winter Park was a getaway for people in the, Northeast to come down and have a park-like, experience. So much so that Lily Park Avenue closed in the summer, not very long, a couple decades ago, because it just cleaned out. Like, this was their vacation spot. Not similar to a theme park, but kind of in that way. So they haven't looked at that a lot. They really want to see more Mediterranean revival, Art Deco, consistent architecture, and they want to give a very clear message to the development community that if you follow the historic pattern of Winter Park, they're very open to pro-business development. But if you come in with something hyper-modern, those types of things are more difficult to sell. So that's a big picture value, is communicating, hey, we're telling the public we agree, it's a very historic place, let's match those up. But we're also telling developers, hey, if you come in with any kind of application, here's what to expect. From a business perspective, for us, it's diversity. We like working with governments because it's kind of a more even tempo. As you know, private sector's got a little more fluctuations, a little more fast pace. So we're doing the design guidelines for Park Avenue, New England, and Orange Avenue. Those are all kind of key areas, main streets for Winter Park. For City of Apopka, we are reviewing the Wild Oaks project on behalf of the city. If you're familiar with that, that's kind of a mixed-use Kelly Park interchange adjacent development. They're shooting for like 4,000 units.
Wow.
With a huge main street there, some anchor tenants that can't be announced, and some health village aspects to that. So we actually, from the city's behalf, are reviewing their application to make sure they're delivering a good product. So I think the value it adds is we have private and public experience in our firm, and we can take a look at it from multiple angles. The economic and financial benefits, which I think is not necessarily the purview of a planning department within a government. We can look at it from a design perspective. We have landscape architecture experience, urban design, and then we are very familiar with public speaking and presentation. So it takes a little bit of the onus off staff to answer every single need, and we can provide a better outcome and product because we just kind of have the design to construction experience. So
now you can help both sides, right? You'll get the experience of how the community or the cities and counties are looking at stuff, and how you can better suit both needs.
Yeah, because we look at all the time and effort as opportunity cost for a developer. If they want to do the right thing, there should be a reward or incentive to do so. So on those projects like Wild Oaks, where we think they have good intent, we're trying to help both sides come to a good product, and which will help the tax base, it'll help economic development, jobs, sales tax, etc. So that's the value we try to add, and then clarifying the message in Winter Park of, what is expected in a historic city like this, and create kind of a cohesive vision for that.
And so my final thing would be, as Florida continues to change, hundreds of people move here every day. The growth can't be held. We have cities out on the coast, like in Volusia County, pushing back on development. What do you see the future landscape for Florida being? What are the needs that we need to address? Things like that.
I think you'll see there's a lot of moratoriums being discussed all over the state because of that pressure, the community pressure, the politics. I think you'll see hundreds of new codes being written from various consultants across the state. I think you will see growing pains from that, because I don't think everyone has that experience on both sides. There are great firms out there. I'm not saying, we're the only one that can write those codes, but I think that will be the trend. You will see a lot of pushback from the public sector against the private, and vice versa. Okay,
Alex, thanks so much for being on the show today. I think you gave us a good landscape of what to look for, what you guys do, how you bring value to our customers and the Florida environment. I think what you said on what the future holds is definitely true. We're going to see that pressure, but for a spot lot builder, I think it's a good benefit to us, as well as I'm hoping that more of your clients get involved with the development and open up more opportunity for the localized builders to bring in some more culture and not just the same box everywhere. Yeah. Not to say that's bad. There's a need for it.
Yeah, I think you guys are happy to be on the show and appreciate it. And you guys are positioned to address some of those changing environments probably more nimbly than the rest. So happy to be on and excited to see what you guys do.
Yeah, so stay tuned for next month. We'll have a shell contractor on talking about why Florida uses shell contractors and not individual trades. Definitely a weird environment. Yeah, everywhere else does different.
I'll have to tune in.
So, thanks.